single teacher school would not probably function there. Government decided to drop it. Schools in remote areas which are running just for one or two children. A lot of things are done in fear. Kind of pushes the teacher to teach just to the test. The regular termly exams that the schools administer are not reliable. Skills that will be introduced will be based on local skilling needs. A fancy way to push kids. At the end of the day, no child from a privileged background is going to become a carpenter. Things will drastically change because of this, implementing whatever they've learned in the classrooms. Does it expand the opportunities that children have? Implementation of policies in the ed sector are not the best of works. Just the policy would not change things, right? This is going to disproportionately affect marginalized children. Does nothing to eliminate this coaching culture. It is not at all a level playing field. Pass a law saying you cannot have coaching classes or coaching centers. No. We say marks don't matter. Marks don't define you. There needs to be systems and processes in place at a school level to address these things.
Welcome to the NEP debate. Today we have with us Krishna Kalla Bhaskaran. He has been a teacher at Chennai's government schools for about 4 years, 2 of which he has been in the administration. He has regularly been speaking up about the issues that plague education, particularly in Tamil Nadu. He also ran a series during the lockdown to address issues that were particularly plaguing marginalized students. In this debate, he will be talking about the NEP, particularly in connection to school education. Plus, we discuss different topics such as vocational skills for students, about the board exams for 3rd, 5th, and 8th standard students, school complexes, marginalization of students, and issues that particularly affect teachers as well. So the NEP says that small schools feel very isolated and teachers work better in a community, which is why it is important to set up school complexes. Can you tell me if you think that this will really help? Do you think it will help, or is it going to cut off access for a lot of kids?
I think the main premise, the main reason for such schools to exist is in order to solve this problem of access. Because they would, if there were an accessible school, that smaller school, a single teacher school, would not probably function there. There will not be any need for it to function there. So when they introduce this concept of school complexes itself, they say such schools are not just the isolation part. I think two important points that they mention is that running such schools is economically suboptimal and operationally complex. Economically suboptimal conditions being a reason to close down schools or restrict access is not how you ensure kids have this right to education. Such schools, wherever they exist, we would have heard a lot of stories about schools in remote areas which are running just for one or two children. They are the only source of education, only source of formal education for such children. In that case, I do not know how they are going to form this school complexes without affecting access, because access was the main need that warranted the establishment of such schools.
Okay, moving on, there's been a lot of talk about board exams even before the final draft came out. I mean, when the previous drafts have come out, people have come out and said, no, it's just not a good idea. But they have stuck to it. The drafting committee has stuck to that. How do you think this will affect students? Will it, like they are saying, do you really think that this will improve productivity, will improve the way that they perform, improve outcomes? Or is it going to scare off children? Also, they've mentioned something called the National Assessment Center. Do you think that having something like that is even possible for a country as large as ours?
You mean the PARAKH? I don't know how they pronounce it. Firstly, I think board exams are mentioned in the NEP in two contexts. One is that they're saying board exams are doing a lot more harm. Board exams in 10th and 12th grades are doing a lot more harm, and it is driving a culture of coaching and rote learning, and it's causing a lot. It's not helping us achieve the vision of how education should be and all that. In that place, they are saying we'll reduce the stakes that is attached to board exams. They'll conduct it twice and all that. Okay, we'll come back to it. The other important part is they are saying that there will be a national exam to understand how the education system functions, or to have like a dipstick. They'll have a national exam at there'll be a common exam at third, fifth, and eighth grades. The reasoning, again, it's very it's built on very flimsy premises, because there are already existing surveys called the National Assessment Survey and the State Assessment Survey, which are done as mainly for the reason that they mentioned, to understand where kids are, to have a look at how the system is functioning and all that. This is just making it in the previous system, it was a sample set of classrooms and children. Now they have made it compulsory for all children. The thing is, the reliability, because the education system functions in such a way, the reliability and the reliability of such course is questionable, because a lot of things are done in fear. And there is a lot, if my school, for example, if a school is selected for the in the present things, if a school is selected for the conducting of the NAS survey or the state achievement survey, you will see a culture of panic there. The teachers who are responsible for those classes, be third, fifth, or eighth, they'll be fully stressed out till that exam ends, and there will be that one full week will be dedicated to ensure that kids perform well in that exam. So this is also another important effect of such high stakes exams. The stakes might be real or perceived. It kind of pushes the teacher to teach just to the test. At one side, you talk about no demarcation between arts and science, no demarcation between curricular and extracurricular activities, no demarcation between all that, and comprehensive. We should see student progress in a comprehensive way and all that. But then at the same time, you are saying there needs to be an exam for us to understand where the progress is. Actually, this kind of shows an underlying mindset that the regular exams, that the regular termly exams that the schools administer, are not reliable. If from my experience, I would say they are more reliable than such high stakes exams, because they are conducted within the school. And what more do you want to understand how children are doing than by taking their regular formative and summative assessment scores? So this is also pushing, increasing this culture of over testing children. There are tests at 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade. Then there will be tests at 10th and 12th grade. Then there will be a common entrance test, which is another big problem. This, and you see it in conjunction with the amendments that they made to the RTE Act, where they said the states can decide if the no detention policy needs to be followed. And some states have reduced the no detention. RT says you cannot detain children till 8th grade. Some states have gone on to reduce that. Considering this, many educational researchers attribute the low number of dropouts in primary and secondary grades to the no detention policy. If the child stays in the education sector for a longer, consistent time, the child would at least achieve basic literacy, numeracy, and those skills. Is the idea behind it. If you conduct an exam at 3rd grade, 5th grade, and 8th grade, and in a state where this no detention policy has been amended or changed, it would kind of increase the number of kids who will drop out or who will end up dropping out of school.
There is this special focus on vocational learning. Now, people say that, in the West, people learn other skills. On Western education, it's really encouraged. So they want to sort of replicate that sort of thing here. But there is, people are saying, why do kids who are, 8, 9 years old, why do they have to do internships? Or what is the need. On the other hand, people are saying, so what if they're learning something out of school? It's going to, teach them something, or they're going to learn a skill and eventually it might help them. Also talking about this bagless period, also they're calling it the bagless period. But do you really think that even though is the bagless period, sort of ironic in the sense that are they still, going to be burdened even if they're not going to be carrying bags in the process? Or, do you think that this is actually going to help and it isn't such a bad idea?
So, in principle, you see, learning a skill, I wouldn't say it is a bad idea in principle, but in India, vocational or menial labor, labor which involves a lot of manual work, has historically been restricted to certain castes and certain groups of people. At the surface, it seems like a very good idea to introduce children to artisanal crafts and all that. In the subtext, it also says the kind of internship or skills that will be introduced will be based on local skilling needs. It is a very, very scary thing to see, because again, you keep this in conjunction with the previous thing that we discussed about exams in 3rd, 5th and 8th grade and the amendments done to the no detention policy. This seems like a fancy way to push kids, especially from marginalized communities, majority of who study in government and low budget private schools, into vocational low skill jobs, instead of making their paths to better professional courses easier. That would be the way to achieve equality and social justice. They also kind of, in a way, allude to the fact that vocational skills and vocational occupations are not respected in this country. They are seen as second this thing to professional courses and all that. It's alluded to dignity of labor and all that, but the thing is, no. At the end of the day, no child from a privileged background is going to become a carpenter or an electrician or a craftsman. So, in substance, this actually is a fancier way of pushing kids whom they dub academically struggling or academically weak into vocational courses, into conjunction also with the common entrance exam that is coming. So it makes it hard for such children, and disproportionately affects the children in small schools and government schools from pursuing professional education.
And now the teacher training course, they've made it a 4-year integrated course. Do you think that this will help the teaching community, or is it going to make them a little nervous about what to expect? How do you think this will affect the teachers?
Again, it's very similar to how we see children as well. It is most of the teachers that I've worked with who have had 20 or 30 years of experience. In those times, they did not, there was a teacher training diploma right after schooling, and then you enter the workforce, right? I wouldn't say many of them are less equipped or less talented to get children to the academic potential or whatever potential that they can achieve. I don't think this be okay. They are going to standardize it. I don't know how access is going to be for those courses in those universities. How intake will be. They are also stressing on TET, which has been opposed for a long time. I'm not sure how things will drastically change because of this. But it is going to probably make taking up teaching as a profession a little bit harder for people from marginalized communities. Another thing is there is already an existing system. There is already a pre-service training and there is already in-service training. Why don't they work? I agree that children are lagging behind in terms of where they should be at grade level and all that. But what are the problems with these existing systems that they are trying to solve? If they are not going to take in those factors, if they are not going to study that properly and sort that out, I don't think just changing the mode of how they become teachers alone would make this difference. In-service training, for example, I've been a part of a few that are done through the government. In-service training, for an example, is very ineffective because it is not at all teacher-centric. There is no kind of it is not aspirational at all. There is no support post that for implementing whatever they've learned in the classrooms, and without all this, it is obviously set up to fail. So I don't think this, I mean, this is further, like I said, it is probably further preventing a lot of teachers from, at least marginalized poor backgrounds, from taking up teacher education, which is the case in all kinds of higher education under this government. And also, it's not solving any of the problems that already exist, is what I think.
You also spoke about this recently, and throughout this conversation, you've also told us. But uh, can you tell us how the NEP, on the whole, could further marginalize students, marginalize the communities? How the NEP could directly affect students from oppressed communities? Do you think that that is something that will happen, even though they have spoken about wanting to be more inclusive and wanting to create more access? Has the NEP done that, or do you think there is going to be further marginalization?
So I think, firstly, there are some good things that the NEP has suggested that must be acknowledged. In the sense, the push for early childhood education, earlier intervention are good measures. The push for ensuring that every class has a optimal pupil-teacher ratio, that is, those things are good. How it will affect marginalized children, I'm thinking of two things. One is how marginalized children disproportionately, vast majority of them study in government schools and small private schools which are akin to government schools in any factor that you may think of. Secondly, does it expand the opportunities that such children have? So how does it affect the problems that that government schools are facing, and does it expand the opportunities that children in such schools have? Like I mentioned, the certain things that they have done is welcome. It should be introduced. I mean, the implementation of it remains to be seen, because historically, at least, I mean, from my experience, the implementation of policies in the ed sector are not the best of works. At the end, everything, if it's controlled by fear, then there is going to be a lot of pushback in terms of either implementing it for a compliance sake or not implementing it at all. For example, there used to be something called the activity-based learning. I mean, it was a UN-funded program which was introduced by one of the IAS officers in Tamil Nadu, and it was theoretically, it's a very well-designed program, but does it actually affect? Did it actually improve anything? It was after 5-6 years, the government decided to drop it because just the policy would not change things, right? So, for example, the ABL suggested a lot of peer learning, that even the NEP suggests, a lot of peer learning, lot of independent practice and all that, again, the NEP suggests. But how are we again seeing how teachers are supported to do that, and how large classes it is impossible to implement such things? In a conventional way of seeing how a good class is how quite the class is. It's very regressive way to see it. But then when you have to engage kids in group discussion, there is going to be noise, and there is going to be a lot of commotion, and it goes against the conventional old ways of seeing how good classrooms are. But if that mindset is not changed with even authorities who come in, the BEOs, the HMs, the AEOs who visit school, then it's obviously not going to work. So a lot of such things that the NEP seem to be addressing, we'll have to wait and see how the implementation is, how many factors they are taking into consideration before setting out to implement them. Some of the timelines seem very, very scary. For example, they say the new assessment, the board exam, common entrance exam thingy will come by 2023, I think 2022-23 academic year. This is going to disproportionately affect marginalized children, like NEET did. NEET came in, there were, before NEET, there were 88, I think 86, 88 children from government schools who could get into government medical colleges. After NEET, every year we see one or two children going into medical courses. It's very, very sad in the sense, and this common entrance exam, however, they seem to say it is very, they are against coaching culture, and they are against they want to reduce the stakes of examination. They are reducing the stakes of, even if we consider that they are reducing the stakes of board exams in 10th and 12th grade, if you are going to conduct a national examination in a country which is very diverse, like you mentioned earlier, where even there might be differences in the kind of content that is taught, it is disproportionately going to affect marginalized children, because it kind of does never, I mean, it does nothing to eliminate this coaching culture. It is not at all a level playing field. Are they going to pass a law saying you cannot have coaching classes or coaching centers? No, they cannot do that. We have seen that with any kind of exam, be it JEE or NEET, or in similar exams that they are proposing, like the SATs in the US. For those things, children are coached from a very young age. Like test taking skills are skills on to themselves, and children are coached on that from a very young age. Without all this support, saying that I'll conduct a national exam and saying that this will stop coaching culture and all that is just, I don't know, it's ludicrous. I think this also, like the second point I was mentioning, how does the NEP expand the opportunities that marginalized children have? Such things do not. Such things actually make it worse. Already we see marginalized children being pushed out of higher education and all that. Very few states do better. This will kind of ensure that opportunity is restricted further. So I think as a whole, the NEP, the good parts of the NEP, we'll have to see how it's implemented. But there are far scarier parts which we need to talk against, stop it from being implemented.
Are there any huge, massive issues or aspects of education that the NEP has overlooked? Maybe something that you thought would be talked about or discussed, anything of that sort that was completely overlooked, or do you think it sort of covered most aspects?
I wouldn't say it was overlooked. I think it has been addressed in certain ways. I think what could have changed, or what is a missed opportunity for the NEP, was to redefine how what we mean by student achievement and student attainment and all that. Because a lot of this is very this kind of, I mean, the existing system kind of is used to reinforce and reintroduce this idea of merit, which is very caste based, which is very Brahmin supremacist, which is very eugenicist in some ways. What could have been done is to say that, okay, it's a very commonplace thing. We say marks don't matter, marks don't define you. But does the NEP talk about it in that way? Probably not. It talks about education being holistic. It talks about need for holistic progress cards and all that. But it goes on to further reinforce the kind of system that we have. Example, the common aptitude test. Example, the assessments that are being done in 3rd, 5th, and 8th. The whole thing is again centered around the old ways of looking at what marks mean and what merit is and all that. So I think that is a huge opportunity that was lost. Second thing, it's a minor thing, I would say. A big I would say two other things. A big problem of one of the big problems of this issue of government schools is that we would hear that parents are disempowered. In a private school, the schools are financially accountable to parents because they pay a fee, and so they have this right to question and all that. In government schools, because education is free, there is this idea that parents are disempowered. It is true to a lot of degree. So there exists a mechanism called school management committees, in which parents are also a part, and everything that needs to be done in the school with regard to infrastructure or spending or even starting a new project needs to be approved by the school management committee. But school management committees have not functioned properly in any, I don't think in any state, so to speak. There has been no talk about how these problems of the school management committees or the general issue of how parents are disempowered, parents are not in a position to hold these schools accountable. With this regard is not addressed. They go on to say we are going to constitute school complex management committees, and I don't know how that will function either. At a school level, if the SMC is very, very disempowered, I don't think at a complex level, which would have parents from from a radius of from schools within a radius of 5 to 10 kilometers that the policy suggests. I don't think that is again it will be done for a compliance sake. The problems with it have not been studied is what I think has happened here. Third is there is a lot of discrimination in schools. The ordeals of Dalit and tribal children in schools, I don't think they have been adequately understood. There are multiple studies in that, but I don't know how, I don't think they have addressed it properly. There are some of the things that they do there needs to be systems and processes in place at a school level to address these things. And it's not just restricted to children. It's even, we see how parents pushed a midday meal worker out of school because she was from a lower caste. In Tamil Nadu only it happened. So such things are not addressed is what I feel. There should have been some kind of new system or process in place to address such things. This has not been, these are some of the issues I think could have been deliberated further.
Do feel free to like, share and subscribe. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.